Okay, now it's recording. It wasn't recording. I will say there are over 100 people registered for this.
Well, wonderful. And I'll just say welcome to everyone as I see the number of participants rising. You know, we're over, well, I see 57 right now on my computer of participants, and the number keeps clicking up, which is wonderful. Barbara, I understand that you were in the middle of, oh.
I was.
Barbara,
Yeah,
I understand you were just giving another talk.
I
so
did.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I just got off of it.
That's how life has been this year. So you
They
go
said
from
there was
one Zoom event to the next.
126 on that one. So this is going to be my lifetime record.
Fantastic. Well, it looks like the participant dial is slowing down in terms of the new people joining this webinar. So I'm going to just say welcome. My name is Bill Valerio. I'm the director of Woodmere Art Museum, and I'm very happy to be here tonight with my friends, Pat Feinstein, Barbara Wolanin, and Kassem Amoudi. And I'm going to introduce each of you individually, but just say that we are here together tonight to celebrate what has been, you know, a wonderful, almost year-long exhibition, Sam Feinstein Immersive Abstraction, together with Group 55 and Midcentury Abstraction in Philadelphia. These are exhibitions that, you know, have been important projects to Woodmere for a long time. Our mission is to tell the stories of the art and artists of Philadelphia. And this is one of the key stories that assembles an understanding of 20th century art in Philadelphia. These are the artists, and these are the artists who led their peers in creating a sense of that, you know, a center of gravity for abstract painting in Philadelphia. It's a rich and wonderful story. I have seen something and learned something new every time I've been in the galleries, you know, with this exhibition, and that's been quite a bit, and I've enjoyed it every time. And it's one of those exhibitions that has just gotten better and better and better, you know, from, you know, as time has gone on. So part of what we want to do tonight is encourage everyone to please come back to Woodmere this weekend. It is the closing weekend, which is hard to believe, but you know, we hope that you will come back to see the show one more time. Also, word of mouth is a very powerful tool in terms of, you know, museum activity and attendance. And if you have friends who haven't seen the show, please encourage them to come out to Chestnut Hill this weekend and enjoy the exhibitions. I'll be in and out of the galleries myself, and you know, we're expecting actually a pretty busy weekend at Woodmere this weekend, so we look forward to that. So the structure of tonight, I'd just love to first introduce our panelists tonight. We are all going to say welcome, but then we have made, Kassem and I have made a video that is a conversation between us talking about art on the walls. We've found over this last year working with Zoom that it can be better to you know, rather than try to live stream something, to film it in advance. We get to work out the kinks of the technology. We don't have to worry if it's going to work or not, or if we're tripping over the wires, or if our headphones are on, or our microphone fell down our shirts. That happened to me during one Zoom call. But we're going to watch a video of Kassem and I walking through the galleries, and then we hope to have a discussion. That's the point of the evening, and I will kick off the discussion after the short video. The video is about 20 minutes. And so tonight, I just want to introduce, you know, first, Pat Feinstein, without whom this exhibition would be impossible in so many ways. Pat, who is the widow of the artist Sam Feinstein, who was the leader of Group 55 and a very powerful artist. Pat has been the caretaker of Sam Feinstein's legacy. And, that has meant caring for paintings as well as caring for, so much of the archival materials out of which we were able, to assemble the story of this show. So I want to thank you, Pat, and, offer you the screen to please, also welcome our guests tonight.
Thank you so much. Yes, well, it is a joy to be here and to have seen the show and have Sam's work and his understanding of art be shared with people in Philadelphia, because he spent his life there from the time he was about 6 until he died. He was still had classes there and teaching there. And it's been such a joy for me to work with everybody, the entire team at Woodmere, and of course the group also at Chestnut Hill, and the wonderful show they put on of his early work. And especially for me to work with Barbara Wolanin. It was a great privilege, and she did a most fantastic job with the catalog. And we had great fun when she came and visited, and we went through miles and miles of archival material, which I'm still surrounded by the way. So that was really, it will go to Archives of American Art as I sort through, but it has been a treasure trove, and it continues to be a treasure trove for us. And also I was able to work with a wonderful woman named Victoria Shue, who of course discovered really Melvina Tays. Dance and music became such an important part of this Group 55 because the language is a language that's shared, the gestures, the movements, the non-thing focused art, so that a dancer, modern dancer, or a musician is creating messages to the inner spirit and the inner world, and that's what the abstract art's about. And she literally discovered Melvina Tays, and it took quite a time to find out more about her, but she wrote a marvelous essay in the catalog. So we have dancers, we have the musicians. Tom Pattison wrote about that for the catalog. So I'm thrilled with the catalog as well as the show, and I just am grateful to everyone. And I was particularly pleased with the recent videos that featured Kassem and his work. I love his paintings, and his insights about Sam's work have been marvelous. So I feel very pleased about the entire thing. So we triumphed despite
Yeah.
COVID, I think, in having a beautiful show, beautiful exhibition.
Yeah. I agree with that. I believe that the show is a triumph. And I think for a lot of people, it was a great touchstone through these difficult months to have this, incredible place to come to, in Woodmere's big rotunda shaped galleries. And we'll be sharing some views of those galleries later tonight. I also wanted to introduce you, my friend Barbara Wolanin. Barbara is a very distinguished art historian and expert in the work of Arthur B. Carles, and frequent collaborator at Woodmere, and with so many of the cultural institutions of the history of Philadelphia, in Philadelphia. Also former curator of the U.S. Capitol, and someone that I enjoy working with from constantly. Barbara, thank you for joining us tonight, and I give you the floor as well to greet our visitors, to greet our guests.
I'm here.
Do you want to say hello, Barbara? Can you?
I would, yeah, but you're not seeing me.
Would you like to just?
Well, I don't think
We
you
are.
can see me.
We see it. I see it.
Yeah, you see.
Oh, you
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't. Okay. Well, hello everybody, and I'm so glad to. This working on this show was so much fun. It really kept my sanity during the whole COVID. I mean, I had met Pat and liked her. We kind of, envisioned how wonderful a show like this would be at Woodmere, and I'd worked with Bill before on Carl's student show, and I knew two of the people in the show well, Jane Piper and Keita Broadhead. Loved them, stayed at their houses many times and wrote on them. And it was just really gratifying. And I learned so much. I didn't know very much about Group 55 at all. They'd mentioned it to me, but I had to figure it all out, who was really in it, what was about. And the fact that Sam Feinstein kept all those papers and the posters and all those things that some of them we had in the case. and Bill Valerio, that your enthusiasm and the beautiful way the show was hung and how beautiful the catalog looks. So, you know, I'm very happy with it too. I'm very, very glad to have been part of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is an enormous pleasure for a museum as an institution to work with a guest curator, you know, of your stature, who brings so much, you know, to the institution. And so, thank you, Barbara, for being our constant partner. And I look forward to the next show.
All right.
But with that, I want to turn to, you know, another Woodmere family member, Kasama Moody, who is a wonderful artist, a friend, someone who inspires so many artists that I know, as a teacher, who inspires people. You inspire people with your work. You inspire people as a teacher as well, is what I'm trying to say here. Kassem, thank you for being with us tonight. And I want to acknowledge that it has been a wonderful part of the journey of this exhibition to travel through it with you. Of all the people that I know, of all the artists that I know, um, it has been wonderful to be part of the unfolding of the show that you have made possible through the deep passion that you have for the work of Sam Feinstein and for many of the other artists in the show, but especially for Sam Feinstein. And, you know, you've contributed to my understanding of the work, as well as contributing to the understanding of, you know, many of the students in our studio program at Woodmere. And, you know, that activity is the life of the show. And, you know, I need to thank you for that. Thank you, Kassem. And thank you for spending the time with me. But, you know, right now, I'd just love to give you the opportunity to say hello and welcome to our guests tonight.
Thank you very much, Bill. I really enjoyed too, like the show, like walking with you in the show, but I enjoyed really talking to you. You are a great guy, you know, and talking to you really
Well,
like,
it's mutual.
yeah, it's like I know you for 100 years, you know, like it's easy for the
Yeah.
people to like,
Through several lifetimes. I believe that.
yeah, I do believe that, you know, so there is kind of like of a connection here, and especially like with your knowledge of art, you know, and talk when you talk about art. I listened to you before, like talking about some exhibitions, and it was really great, you know, very inspiring, like when you do talk about it. Now, I did enjoy really like that talk about Sam Feinstein and the group 55, you know, and it was really, it is still going on for a couple more days probably, and it's a great show. Like if you haven't seen it, like it's really like worth seeing it really. It's one of the best shows actually, if you love colors, you know, love colors, because especially Sam Feinstein is really about colors, you know, like this is what the best in him, you know, like, and he makes it like very simple, you know, it's not complicated. Usually like artists, when they start their career, they try to do like hard things and compete and do a lot, you know. But as they grow more, you know, older, and they now know more the techniques, you know, they start simplifying and simplifying and simplifying, you know. So there is like one or two things dominating the painting. It doesn't have to be 100 things, you know. And this is really what Sam Feinstein really like did, especially like with this exhibition, with his colors, like wonderful colors, which I really, I want to say too, that really Sam Feinstein inspired me like maybe 20 years ago when I bought his book, you know, and I saw this. It was a magnificent thing, you know. I always loved colors. I know a lot about art, but like the one who really inspired me and made me stop and think about really colors and how to do them, you know, it is really Sam Feinstein, you know. I started to study that, like the rainbow effect in his work, you know, which is taken really from the rainbow, the red followed by orange, followed by yellow, by green, by blue, and purple, and go back. And I see this in his work, And there is no more harmony actually than that, you know, like, because everybody loved the rainbow, like kids or old or like young, it doesn't really matter, everybody. This is like music, like same like the color wheel, you can divide these colors. They are exactly like in the piano, like A, B, C, D, like when you play them, you know. So he made it really simple, you know, simplifying that you don't have to worry about like what's the meaning of it, you know, or what's this or that, you know, like it's just simple, a statement. He make a statement with his colors. And of course, like I can add the texture, you know. And I want to add too, like I talked about like the inspiration. He inspired me actually. I inspired my students with his work and they started to do better colors actually. One of them is today actually in that workshop I did about color matters. It was really focused on Sam Feinstein and the group 55 and they did wonderful colors. After I showed them, you know, how he does it, they did wonderful. I cannot share now, you know, but like at the end of like the thing, you know, I can really like send you some of their paintings, like very, very wonderful. And actually, I carried his inspiration like with me through the years. But actually, the latest was like with my show. Like there is a show started yesterday, and it's my work is called like the Stripes series. And actually I did take that Stripes, you know, like, and that descending from his latest work. At the latest work he did like some small paintings and they were magnificent actually, where like things are descending like from the sky, like verticals, you know, and with his colors formulas like that with the rainbow effect, you know, in them, it was mesmerizing, you know. So I really loved that, you know. I was looking for like what to do like shapes, and it's really not about shapes, you know. It's just like do the thing you really like I do like the stripes, and I loved it. And you will see it like in my show, actually, you will see this kind of like sprites coming down and some of like his inspiration of colors in my show. And by the way, the virtual opening will be on Saturday, this Saturday at 2. And you can register and get the link from the gallery. They will give you the link and you can see like the connection with these, like most all the series I'm showing is like of that stripe series, which really I owe Sam Feinstein opening my eye to the possibilities, you know, of that.
Sam,
So
thank you so much. I want to just make sure that everybody knows that the show you're talking about is at the Cerulean Gallery, which is on Ridge Avenue, right near the Divine Lorraine Hotel, in the Fairmount section of Philadelphia. And it's a wonderful place. Mike and Tina, who run the gallery, are rock stars, and I'm very happy. I'm looking forward to seeing your show there.
yeah, thank you very
Kassem.
much. You do great installation, and they
I
do
think,
too, you know.
oh yeah. Oh,
Like,
Tina has an amazing talent. You know, she comes to running a gallery from being an architect, and you know, her sense of space and color and installation really shows. So, well, I think that what we should do, because Sam, I didn't want to cut you off, but
yeah,
let's show the
yeah,
video, because I think some of the things you were describing get developed in the conversation in the show, and then we can, you know, come back and, you know, talk some more. To our guests, please, you know, we want to be interactive. Use the chat, you know, use the chat format to answer questions and communicate. Hildy Tao, who is Woodmere's Director of Education, is going to be monitoring, and she will be your voices. And we're going to try to, you know, engage with all of the questions or comments that you know, are put into the chat stream. So let's roll them and see the video. Hello everyone, my name is Bill Valerio. I'm the director of Woodmere Art Museum, and I'm here in Sam Feinstein Immersive Abstraction, an exhibition on view at Woodmere with my friend and colleague, Kassem Amoudi, who is a wonderful painter, a teacher in Woodmere's studio program with a class coming up. Yes. That is actually inspired by the show that we're going to talk about today. This is going to be a little bit of a gallery talk, but also rolling up our sleeves and talking to Kassem about how art inspires more art. Kassem, I've described as a wonderful artist and a wonderful teacher. What I've learned about Kassem over the years here at the museum is that Kassem is always also learning and absorbing from the energy of the art that's on view at the museum. So I am thrilled and really excited to be here with Kassem's recent painting.
Actually, it is from On the Way Home series.
On the Way Home.
I wrote a small poem for it, but yeah, it's from On the Way Home. I did a whole series like my show at Sierra Leone Art.
What we wanted to talk about is how your art is inspired by, the art on the museum wall, especially Sam Feinstein. And one of the things that I've learned and that I've been so happy to learn is your great admiration for Sam Feinstein's work.
It's actually, the relationship is really about the colors, how to put the colors together, really. When I discovered Sam Feinstein, actually, by his book, really, the painting in his book, it was really amazing. It's like magical colors, symphonies of colors, You cannot but love them, it doesn't matter what he painted, it's the how, and as a teacher, actually, art instructor, I showed his painting to many of my students, and actually it didn't just inspire me, it inspired a lot of my students too. They started using the colors the same way. This is probably the way of the masters, like what Sam Feinstein did, same like Kandinsky and Bonnard. If you look at the three artists I just mentioned, you will see like they all really, when they did the colors, their formula is really the rainbow colors, how the rainbow colors, the sequence, with Sam Feinstein, you never can see really like yellow without putting an orange next to it, because yellow makes orange, or a green next to it, because yellow makes green.
That's interesting, because as soon as you think that you're looking at yellow, you find the orange.
Exactly. like here, you see like it's yellow, then green, yellow-green, then yellow, like it comes like that, then blues, then purples and reds, it's everywhere. You will see it like in his work, like that's beautiful. Like this is blue, next to it is green, next to it is yellow, next to it is orange, next to it is red. That's a rainbow color,
So there's a structure to the application of color here.
Yes.
It's not random.
Yes.
And it's not intuitive, it's structured.
Well, it is both actually, because you can use the opposite, like you don't have to put like next to the yellow, like the green or the orange. I can put actually purple next to the yellow, and it will be even stronger, but with one condition, is not to make them like the same size, because they will fight each other. But a little bit like purple next to like a big yellow will make it more interesting. A little bit orange next to the blue, a bigger blue, it will make it more bluer and more interesting, And the opposite is true, like each one will strengthen the other. Like look at this part here, like how this blue, like putting that orange next to it makes the blue really bluer and more beautiful. And especially like with like a little bit yellow, a little bit green, then like green, it's, so you will see like that he really doing that in his work.
Well, and then he also manages to create incredibly rich passages with color. So just you can get lost in this whole section here in these blues and greens and purples and as soon as you think, oh, I'm looking at blue, you realize, no, it's not blue. It's green or it's purple.
A lot of mixes, actually, a lot of mixes of colors. He was very generous with that, with color, with the use of colors, instead of just like squeezing a tube. He really has like some really good palettes to work with, so yeah, and he keeps really this is one of the things he said, really, he wants to make music with his colors, he wants to make music with his colors. So it is really like making music, because when you look at this, how he puts the yellow next to it, the orange, the red, the purple, the blue, and then the green, and then the yellow again. It's really same like the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, it's exactly the same, like when you do the things, when you play the piano, tam, 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 so he really plays music with his colors.
Let's talk about your painting, Kassem, which is so beautiful to have here in the gallery. And again, I love art that speaks to other art. So talk to me. I mean, I do see, touches of, we've talked about how yellow and orange next to each other, or here's, red and yellow and orange, and then two shades of orange, orange on top of green. How's the color working in this painting?
Yeah, sometimes really I use the color like spice, like how you put spices in the food,
Not too much, but enough to give it some...
Not too much, like to put cayenne pepper, you burn the people, and so you just put enough, So sometimes really I have really colorful paintings with a lot of blues and supportive colors of the complementary colors like orange and sometimes whites. I had really a lot of series, I called it white with a past, where things happen in that white. But mostly the painting, 90% of it is white, and it has that 10% makes the difference in it, So it is kind of like a journey, where a table, a glass, something here, there, something far, without really knowing or explaining what are these things, just giving hints about the things, Maybe they are in this one the glass and this but other things you really, what are these They are only instruments, in the hand of the artist to put brush strokes, what are these brush strokes, So you can see here how, same like the rainbow colors, that's yellow and green, and yellow and orange. And of course, the red is smaller, so it's supporting the green and instead of competing with it if it is the same size. And of course, the blues next to it, the blues, So I do that kind of here too, kind of here, yellow, orange. These kind of colors, when you put them together, they really they make a beautiful harmony. And the way I do these things, actually, I never plan. I never knew I'm going to do a glass or a table or this or that. What was before is I do things like that. This is really the beginning of the painting, where I do just wild, spontaneous brush mark making, strokes, drips sometimes. So these are left over from what was under the paint. Of course, I painted over a lot of it later on, and only left parts of that showing. So Carl actually is one of my favorite artists, really, especially dealing with the colors, how he does the colors, because he's using the same thing, actually, the same formula, with Kassem Feinstein using the same formula. If you see here, there is a yellow, and then there is a green next to it, and there is a blue. Kind of you will see red and orange, and here too a green, yellow and blue, and purple, kind of like next. So you see that kind of like that effect everywhere in his painting, and very rich mixes like of colors, like especially like because he does use too the thin and thick application. So some of the painting is really thin, you know, like he did it thin, and some of it is thick. This is what Matisse did actually too. Like, so these guys, like the artists who really know the way, you know, like they know the way, when they start the painting, they start really thin, you know, they spread some colors thinly, you know, and then after that, they start attacking it with thicker, and then thicker, and then thicker in some areas. So the color is not just applied one time, like which becomes like house painting, you know, like, and I love his use of line too. Like line is really very important thing he is doing specifically in his painting, which really reminds me of Kandinsky, where like actually I would say like Kandinsky invented that, you know, kind of like where line has its own voice, you know. It's not really following the color like people before, like if I have a shape, I just outline it. Well, he doesn't outline, he crosses the shapes, all the shapes with the line, you know. So it has its own voice, and that's really more power without having to change the color, you know, like because like this and this. Why do I have to change it? Let the line go.
Well, so what's so amazing about Carl's, and this is just a little bit of the history, is that he was able to take that kind of fragmented metaphor of the world that came from Cubism, but he also, you know, embraced with a bear hug the colors of Fauvism and Matisse. And so he brought back from Paris, and Carl's lived in Paris for many different periods of time in the early decades of the 20th century. And so he was participating in the artistic scene of Paris with Picasso, with Braque, with Matisse, you know, with the other great artists. And he brings it back to Philadelphia in his own way, where it's all about color, and, you know, the color really jumps out at you. And as you've said, Carl's is one of the great colorists. He's so sophisticated with color. And at the same time, he knows exactly what he's doing with this world of Cubism, which, you know, in so many ways, it's like a metaphor of the uncertainty of everything, right? Cubism was just like, oh, you think you see it, but you don't. And, you know, that's what the world has become in the 20th century. We don't have all the answers. And I think that that's one of the things I love about this painting is, as much as you love this painting and your eye can engage with it and your mind can engage with it, it never quite gives up its secret. It's very mysterious painting, and it brings you someplace where, to me at least, you always want to know more. This is a painting in the collection From a Peach Orchard by Kita Broadhead, 1954, so a good, 15 years later than the painting that we were just looking at. But Kita, was a student of Carls's, like she was officially enrolled in his classes at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and she continued to take classes with Carl's after he was no longer teaching there. But when I see this kind of central element in the painting From the Peach Orchard, and I don't know if that's the peach in the middle or the pit of the peach, but it has this circular form that so much reminds me of that shape in the Carl's painting. And I love the way, I can think about how here is a student of Carl's, and you see a lot of those green colors that are similar to the Carl's colors.
Exactly.
But, she's creating a whirlwind. I mean, that this painting is moving fast.
Yeah. I agree with you, really. Like you see the inspiration of Arthur B. Carl's really on her work, like color-wise, because she's doing the same thing. Like always, the color has variation. See, like it's very dark here at the edge. It gets lighter. It gets more orangey or red. It gets pink. It gets like red.
Yeah.
Like this variation of the family of color, of one family of color, she uses that a lot in her paintings.
So green on green, in other words, and red on pink.
Yeah. And of course, like next to them, you will see something opposite, like green and pink or red or stuff like that. And another influence is like her lines. She's doing that. You see, like the triangles here, kind of like triangles here, but without it being triangles, but using the line, too, like in her work, actually, it is really like probably she did take it from Arthur B. Carr.
And an artist who's part of this conversation too, who was a close friend of Kita's, and a mentor to Bill Scott as well, and another student of Arthur Carl's, is Jane Piper. And,
Jane Piper, yeah.
And what's wonderful about this show, which is Group 55 in Midcentury Abstraction in Philadelphia, is that we really see this moment in the middle decade of the 20th century when artists are putting forward abstraction as this new thing, and there's a freshness and an urgency to it. Like the Kita Broadhead painting, which is, a peach orchard, so it's a landscape of some kind.
Yeah.
This too is a landscape, and yet the landscape, it's hard to find something solid to rest your mind on in this painting.
Her formula is like yellows and greens, yellows and greens and oranges to reds, kind of, like she's using that, like in this. And actually, Jean Balzel, like her daughter, actually, she inherited that in her genes, because like it's not like this. She doesn't work like this. She's more wild,
fluid,
more wild and spontaneous, with mark making, and she does really beautiful work. I admire her work too.
And here, as in the Feinstein painting we started out talking about, the colors are applied in these linear strokes. And they speak to each other sort of across the filaments, so to speak.
You just love their painting regardless of what they paint, what the subject matter is, When you see beautiful colors, it's same like when you put the piano, just do the dang, 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 dang. You will feel good, when you hear it, even without really being like a symphony or something, but it feels good. Or when you tune the guitar, you tune the things, make it pull and push and pull with the string, so this is really like what the artists really do, like they tune the painting, like the colors in the painting, they tune them. It needs to be stronger here, weaker, this one, so they do not fight each other.
Well, one of the reasons that I love abstract painting is because it's a very sophisticated language. And you really have to slow down and look at a painting, like this, and start to read it and interrogate it and say, where is that shape? And what is, you read the background as being white, but then in a funny way here, it feels like the foreground is white. And again, it has to do with something you were talking about thickness and thinness of paintings and just tiny hints that, this is covering over something else, and I see the piece of the line there. There's a real sophistication that, is in the language of abstract painting, and, I love it. And I think it's wonderful to engage with that sophistication together with somebody else who also loves that sophistication. So, Kassem, thank you so much. This was wonderful. We are in the Cook and Del Bueno galleries looking at Sam Feinstein and Immersive Abstraction, as well as Group 55 and Mid-Century Abstraction in Philadelphia. These are exhibitions on view until Sunday, May 9th, and we are also getting ready for a 3-day painting workshop with my friend Kassem. So if you were inspired by some of the things you've been hearing, please sign up for the class. Kassem is an amazing teacher. I know so many artists whose world has opened up thanks to Kassem. The information about Kassem's class is on Woodmere's website, woodmereartmuseum.org. And I thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Thank you, Hildy, for Hildy and Amanda for managing the technology that allowed us to see the video. I enjoyed seeing that again, having lived through it and have converse with you. Kassem was still fresh on my mind, and a real pleasure. I thought we would start, just sort of opening up the conversation. First, I'll run through the slides, and here you see an installation view of the exhibition, Woodmere's Beautiful Cook and Del Bueno Galleries. And Hildy, I think I have to ask you to advance the slides. We'll go through them really quickly. And Arthur Carlson's Abstract Bouquet, which played a starring role in the movie. Next, we'll just run through them real fast so everybody knows that the images are here in case anybody wants to ask a question about a particular painting. Requiem by Kassem Feinstein, a painting from the 1990s. Next.
It's next, Bill.
An untitled painting by Kassem Feinstein from 1959. Next. I just wanted everybody to know the paintings are here. From A Peach Orchard by Keita Broadhead, 1954. And next. And Landscape Toward Abstraction, Torre Molinos by Jane Piper, 1958. These are the paintings that Kassem and I discussed in the painting, in addition to Kassem's own painting, which played a starring role. And next, view of the installation. Next, again, beautiful. And what's really nice to see is people in the galleries. Looking at a painting by Mitchell Wagman, family looking at Kassem Feinstein.
And that's it, Bill.
Well, Hildy, thank you for assembling some gallery views. I think it helps, get a sense of scale of these paintings. And that's important to understand them. I thought I would just open this up with a question, and I'd love Pat and Barbara for you to jump in as well, but I thought I would start with Kassem and just say, what is, and I have certain ideas about this, but what do you believe, is the legacy of these artists to the art making of today? I mean, we've talked, that's, maybe the main subject of what we discussed in the video, but Kassem, if I said, how is it that these artists' work have an impact on the art making of today? What would your answer be?
Well, my answer will be really like that. They really went farther than everybody else, like that's going that extra mile, like the people who succeed always the ones who go extra mile, the people who stop, and they won't make it, it's same like a lot of sailors sailed, to discover islands, and they discover small islands, that have some food, some stuff, they settled there. But Christopher Columbus said, no, there is a bigger island, I'm sure there, and he kept sailing, and until he discovered America, so these artists went farther than everybody else, and as they go farther too, it started to become more simplified, where they start to know that really less is more. I don't have to do 100 things and think and do whatever, in the painting, less is more. So it's kind of like their work is distilled, distilled. So same words meaning for with abstraction, it's distilled, it's focused on particular things, and they to repeat that, so it sticks with the people. And this is why I really like with abstraction, especially like this, I find really a lot like the kids really love really abstraction more than adults. Adults need to think, oh, what this means, I cannot understand it, and stuff like that. We don't have to understand it, actually. The kids love it because it's like something like, oh, like the colors, without worrying about meaning or anything like that, it's like, as I always say, like it's like the birds singing, they love it, like how the birds sing, like we don't have to understand what the birds is saying when he's singing, but it sounds good and we love it. And same like with art, it's the same exact thing, we do not have really to understand, we just, it's either you like it or no. It's like harmony. Their painting becomes harmony. This is where the legacy, this is where they make it in the art history, in the art books, because they went really farther and dived into something they discovered. So each of these artists discovered something new, something their own, after like they went all around, with their painting, trying many styles, and at the end they get into what they want to say, and they put it in front of us, and then we take it from them and we go a step farther, then we add our voice too. Same like they added their voice to it, to the art world, we add our voice to it too. Same like with the marathon, like the torch, they run with the torch, they pass it to us here, and we don't have to go back and start from where they started, really, We start from where they ended and take it even one step farther. We added our voice to it. So these like leave their imprints, on art, and we learn from them, a link in a chain, so each of these added something really wonderful to art. And this is why we are here, like with abstraction, we look at abstraction, we appreciated it. We're like 500 years, it wasn't really like, even like the Fauves, like Matisse's, work was rejected, like at the Salon Museum, because the Fauves, with all these red colors and stuff, like he was rejected because he was ahead of his time, ahead of his time. He went farther, So this is why
Sam,
that legacy. Yes.
something that you said really struck me, and it's part of the joy of working in a museum. And it does have to do with children and the way children interact with art. And one of the important things that I think art can create as an experience for children is an understanding of abstract relationships. So, what they see in a work of art can then be applied in a broader way to life in general. Abstract thinking, we have to do that every day to, get through life. And, it's not something that we necessarily stop and think about consciously, but abstract thinking is something that does have to develop. And I think that educators understand now, in more precise ways than ever before, how abstract thinking develops. And I'm so glad that you mentioned children, and in some of the photographs that Hildy, who's the director of education at Woodmere, after all, some of the photographs Hildy selected to show had to do with children really looking at the art and looking at abstract art, and what children get from this, I think, is very precious in terms of how the mind develops, and abstract painting being a tool for the development of abstract thought. And it is something that we see every day, in the life of the museum. And I'm so glad that you described it. Pat, if I were to ask you, yeah, please dive in.
In the transcripts, there's some discussion of the children's art and what is the difference, and an audience member saying, well, what is the difference? And there was a discussion of that, and talking about how the artists come to understand how gestures and forms and shapes convey a deeper kind of meaning, and so they can develop their art in a way that a child can't. But the children you know, I've been an educator, art educator, and children have a natural connection to rhythm. And as they grow up, they begin to separate and categorize. And education, oftentimes, you know, public education or even whatever schooling, what Sam would have called schooling, tends to lead to separations of things and identifying and the nouns. And so it's interesting that in music, you know, you don't go and listen at a pastoral symphony. You're not looking for a subject matter. You're not looking for a sheep bleating or something. But oftentimes in art, people still think of the subject matter as being significant or important, and it's the recognition factor for them that makes a sense of comfort. But it is that rhythmic order that is in all, and drive, the creative drive that goes through all nature, that Sam taught about and encouraged. He believed that everybody is creative, and you can see it with children. Every child can be incredibly creative and natural in their rhythm, and express themselves easily. And then as you get older, it becomes more difficult in a way. And many artists have talked about that. You know, Picasso talks about the importance of play. Einstein talks about the importance of play. I mean, the creative faculty and the ability to, you know, understand and organize and sense things. And so much of our world is beyond the physical. We look around and see it, and there's things and nouns and words. But our own interior world, and one of the artists, well, actually it was Tom Pattison in his discussion of music in the catalog, talks about the music being, you know, almost a portrait of the inner world, the world of our feelings, of our psyche, of the soul. And nurturing that is what I think, and expressing that is what so much abstract art is about. Sam called them evocations, his paintings. He wanted them to express some sort of deep awareness of human feeling and human capacity, the ineffable life that we all have inside ourselves. And it was in the 1950s that they were expressing so many individual things in the face of a lot of conformity, a lot of questions about what life was about, the pressures after World War II, etc. And you have existentialism, and you have John Cajun music, and you have new ways of seeing and hearing and thinking about the arts and freeing the individual and the multiplicity. And one of the fascinating things about the Group 55 is all the individual voices that you see there as you have this collection of paintings, each one magnificent. There's a huge range of abstraction that expresses such a wide range of what our interior lives are about, or what nature. I think it was Doris Staffel who mentions, looking into space and outer space or microscopic space. And it was she who said, and she was a wonderful leader, the leader of the second forum. She was the host for the second and third forums. There were so many women who participated in this in a very active way, which was really significant in the 50s. But she says you have to develop a habit of being open to openness. And I think that's what our culture needs, certainly. And it foretells what has been happening actually in culture.
Thank you, Pat. No, I being open to openness is a great thing for us to remember. There's a painting in Woodmere's collection by Doris Staffel, and the title is The Gateless Gate. So it's kind of negating the gate, the gate being a barrier, and it's gateless, but it's a gate. And she had Doris had an amazing thing with words. So being open to openness is something that I'm going to remember from this. Barbara, what do you feel is the legacy of
Well, I tried to write that in the catalog. In fact, I didn't know about Kassem and his paintings, or I could have put him in too, because you're definitely showing that. But I do feel that the legacy, very strong from Carl's and what his students and their students, and that it's still beautiful things are still being created today out of that stream. And I see art history as there's it's like a big fabric where there's different strains going on and different ideas, but this idea of the abstraction and the color, you know, is continued in Philadelphia till today. I mean, I think one thing with this show that, I mean, this whole, the ideas in that period were so rich and trying to bring in, you know, connect the abstract painting with science and architecture and music and dance and all different fields, Jungian psychology, everything, that there was, you know, this just sense that the world was really changing and they were a part of, you know, what was there right then that was contemporary, what was important for their time. And so, you know, and it's wonderful that it's continued. And as Pat said, so much variety in the ways that people used it, which I really liked as well.
So many were educators too. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to be verbal. They wanted people who could talk
Yeah.
about and think about art,
Yeah.
but exchange ideas. And, you know, Doris Staffel, Raymond Hendler. I mean, there's a whole range of educators who spent the rest of their lives in different areas of the country, actually, teaching, and who participated in this.
Jane Piper and Doris Stoffel here, and you know, they're in Philadelphia. And I mean, I think to me that this show really demonstrates that there is this thing about Philadelphia kind of getting written out of the history of abstract expressionism, you know, which is not right. I mean, there were these wonderful paintings in the show that are as good as a lot of things being done that by artists that have gotten more attention. And that's actually when I started working on Carl's, I felt like he is such a wonderful painter that he should be better known. And when I started working on him, I could only find, you know, one image of him. Barbara Rose liked him. She had some images in one book. I couldn't find, there were no other images or barely mentions of him in any of art history, American art history. And yet he, you know, he did have a big impact on a lot of people and the New York artists that knew of him and knew about him and his work.
Mhm. Yeah, he was close to
I
Hans
mean,
Hofmann, and of
Barbara,
course, several were involved with Hans Hofmann as well.
I want to just comment and say, Barbara, you mentioned your essay in the catalog, which really is, you know, definitive in terms of telling this story in detail. And one of the things that comes across in your essay, and you know, you mentioned it, and Pat, you also just spoke a little bit about these artists as educators. That is, I mean, I think one of the messages of the show is, and through your work, Barbara, is that these artists are distinguished by their wish to be part of a public dialogue in Philadelphia, to be, you know, not in a didactic way, but in a mind-opening way, to you know, contribute to the culture of the city. And I don't think that same dimension of public engagement in a broad way exists in the culture of New York, period. But certainly in the abstract expressionist artists, I think of that as being a conversation, you know, within a more closed kind of forum, where what's so interesting about this group of artists in Philadelphia is that it is an open forum. And Pat, you mentioned several of the forums organized by Kassem Feinstein and the Group 55 artists. That's a distinguishing feature about, I would say, about Philadelphia, but it's really one of the powerful arguments that I think comes through in your essay, Barbara.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
As a contribution.
And, you know, I know people, I've shown the catalog to somebody I knew who was actually an art teacher, you know, and she had no idea of how to look at an abstract painting. She had to try to find some object in it, you know, to try to imagine, you know, a lot of people still today, all these years later, could use the kind of education that Kassem Feinstein was giving to people in Philadelphia to understand and be able to enjoy and really appreciate these paintings like these.
Yeah, it has been I have to say that the show has been an eye-opening experience for so many of my colleagues in the museum community of Philadelphia, art historians and curators who did not know this story. And yet this is a very important story in terms of having any kind of coherent understanding of 20th century art in Philadelphia. And it is also a contribution to the understanding of 20th century American art in a broader way. So, in terms of the accomplishments of the show, I think, there are some very concrete achievements and contributions to an understanding of the broader picture of what is modern American art. Hildy, I'd love to ask if there are any questions in the chat.
There are a couple of questions. So I think in some ways you've answered them, but there is a question aside from color. What is the unifying element of the art of Group 55? Was there a political backstory or statement? So you've said a lot of it, but I don't know if you just want to.
Barbara, do you want to answer that?
I don't think there, well,
is there a
political,
unifying?
political, not so much. I mean, I think these were people that were passionate, they were intellectual, they were interested in ideas, they were interested in educating people. So I don't know about, about their politics. I mean, one thing that I pointed out is that a lot of them were first or second generation immigrants from like Russia, the Ukraine. I mean, they were people that, they were but really passionate about their community, I think, and appreciative of it and wanting to add to it and enlarge it, through the forums and things that they were doing. They put a lot of energy into that. Yeah.
I would like to add that I think the statement that they're making in organizing and getting together and having these forums is the importance of the arts, the essential quality of art as being something that Sam would call it, and Hoffman called it this, life enhancing, an important element of culture. And they believe that very firmly, really devoted their lives to that concept. And that also speaks to the importance of the individual awareness and intelligence that gets nurtured. And that's a political statement in itself, in a way. So they weren't aligned with a particular politics other than a strong belief in culture and the importance of culture as a lifting quality for all people.
I have to say that both Jane Piper and Keita Broadhead told me that they were in Group 55. They just, the look on their face, they were very proud of it, that they'd heard, Khan speaking and things like that. But I never asked them about it, any of the details. And so to me, it was real detective work to try to put this history of this group together, luckily with all the wonderful archives that Pat has. And I was just determined I was going to get it as right as I could, because nobody else is going to write about this. And this is going to be the source for it, and really worked hard on it, trying to make sure everything was, documented and accurate as I could.
This was happening just about the time of the McCarthy hearings, too. And there, in the research, the only person we found that really had any interaction with that problem, and people had to, actually there were a couple of them, people had to be very careful, and I think they were. Ben Hare, who was not a member of Group 55, he was a young student at the time, told me that he was lifted off the streets of Philadelphia because he came into downtown in old work clothes, etc. He was put in jail, he said. I mean, there was you had to be careful about certain things, evidently. And Melvina Tays, the dancer, had, there were problems in her life, I guess. She had gone as a young woman up to an area of the Catskills that was a kind of stronghold of socialist ideas, Jewish immigrant socialist ideas. And just the fact that she had been there and performed there made some sort of connection for certain people. And there is a story, and I believe it's conveyed in the dance essay, that at one point she and her two children took books out of their house and burned them one night. out of fear. So, I mean, I think people in the arts were maybe trying to make themselves small targets, among other things, at that period of time. So it's an interesting historical period of time in America.
Yeah, that 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 what I hear both you, Barbara, and you, Pat, saying is that there is a politics to the urge of expression,
Mm.
of of not being um, boxed in and not accepting status quo, of pushing beyond. But I think what was one of the way this question was phrased too, I mean, it was also, aside from color, what are other unifying factors? And I want to ask this of you, Kassem, because I would say that a unifying factor across the artists in this show is the gestural quality of the art. That this is not hard-edged abstraction. There's a, you know, there's a love of paint, a love of color, and of the gesture. And you know, each artist does it in a different way, and you know, has a different voice with it. But I would say that that's a unifying quality. And I wonder if you agree with that, Kassem, or would you nuance that, or do you think that there are other unifying qualities across this group?
I do agree with the gesture thing, like especially with Sam Feinstein. Actually, it's like a lot of his work. You will see something coming like from the top, even they are a huge painting, but coming from the top to the bottom. And another one coming from the left to to the right, like gestures, like he did work with that. And of course, he was a teacher. So some of like his followers, or even the group 55, saw that too, and they did that too, like a big thing in the painting. I think what unify all these is each one of them really kind of try to make their own way, found their own voice. That's what's the most important thing about art. We can learn a lot. We can do the things like perfect, but this all doesn't matter. You have to find your own voice. Even if it's little, it doesn't have to be really very strong and loud, like you can make with something simple, really like a masterpiece, same like Paul Klee when he was trying to do like the masters like Leonardo da Vinci or Raphael. He said, if I spend all my life trying to do just one painting like this master, I cannot do that. What should I do, So he said too, like that, I want to find something as easy for me as signing my own name, like my signature, and he started doodling like children, Then he became like one of the masters of modern art, Paul Klee, like Kandinsky's friend, So what unified this is that they already want to find their own voice. They did take from the others. Each one of them was inspired by somebody else, but they didn't just repeat that somebody else. They went really after they digested that, they went and start singing with their own voice, So you can see that uniqueness in each of them. When I see a painting, I will know this is so and so. Like if I saw Feinstein, I know I don't have to read really the name of the artist, with this or with Piper or with Kita, project or you know them, without reading really the name, So they all went really farther. They did not stop when they did the painting, that most people judge the painting by their past experiences, by the things they have learned, so far. Will it change? It's not that anymore, really, for the people who really know. It's about what are more possibilities are there ahead of us in the future? What can I do more than what I had? So when I judge or a painting or something, I do not look just at the past. I look at the future too. Oh, is this a possibility? Well, there is a possibility, So I go there, So this is why they are really very creative, and they took a lot of obstacles in front of them in order to arrive to that destination, which is really like creativity, especially after they find their own voice.
Sam would say the word creative, the creo creare, to grow. And it was, I think these were such serious artists trying to express something of a serious nature, each in their own way. And one of the things that unites them, I think, is I don't see works there that are purely decorative, or superficial, something, finding something and just making a pretty something. They're all explorers, and that's what creating is a great exploration.
Well, so one of the things, about the overall concept of abstract expressionism is there's the abstract part and there's the expressionism part. And I think that what comes through the show is both of those things in the voices of each of the artists. So let's take another question.
So we have a question from Kathleen asking if Pat can speak to what Sam's philosophy of painting was.
Well, he believed that what he called plasticity was the term he wrote about it. He made several attempts at his writing in his book, said he spent his entire life trying to describe what art was about. He believed that nature is going through everybody and that creating a work of art is allowing that flow to go through and not stopping it or tapping it down with the intellectual brain, but allowing intelligence, a kind of supra-intelligence, let's say, to flow through. And, that's what I spoke to earlier about children. He believed that everybody would and could paint, that everybody is logically creative because we're all a part of nature, and nature is creative. It's always creating, it's always moving, and that was his philosophy. So he spent his lifetime teaching, and he could draw out. He said education is a drawing out, and that's again a Latin term. Drawing out from people, what the voices they had, what they could channel or act as a transformer of nature's energies going through them. And so and he did believe in building out of color, yes, and color is the building block, the natural building block. He said a stone wall is made out of stones and a painting is made out of color. And so that's what he taught also. But he had the broader vision of seeing it in almost scientific terms, in a sense that there's energy everywhere and everything is alive with energy, with atoms, and space is. And it's interesting, Doris Staffel also was saying the same thing. They talked about space and everything is energized. And so he wanted that sense of energy to come through in a painting, a sense of life. And he thought actually that that working with color to create light, and that light is something that on a flat surface can be an equivalent to what a 3D life is, or what a life, we look around ourselves, we hear things, we smell things, we touch things, but with a painting that's flat, the precise use of color could actually make an equivalent through its energy, its gestures, and the creation of light. So that was his belief for his own painting and his belief in his teaching.
Interesting.
Thank you, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have a question from our panelists. She would like to know if Group 55 artists were here today, what do you think they would be up to?
That's a good question.
What they would be what? Asking?
What they would be up to, what they would be doing.
Painting more.
Well, you look at
Painting more.
Sam Feinstein kept painting until he died in 2003, and he kept pursuing it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like Ron Bechtel, who was actually has some of the least gestural paintings in the show, but then later he went and was doing all these very spontaneous things with splashing and dripping, and maybe actually the Group 55 that, I just thought of that, influenced him really to kind of move in a different direction, and just to, he really had fun just exploring and playing with color and the materials, the paints and the inks that he worked with for the rest later in his life.
Mhm.
But I think, I mean, that's what one thing is like these major artists in the show. I mean, Keta Broadhead, she was still trying to paint. She was 101. I mean, Jane Piper was painting beautiful paintings when she was, knew she was dying. It was the last year of her life, and painting was so important. And that was like, that's what they were, what they did. And they would have kept going, even if they lived all these, some records of all these years later, but
Because this is living really, like I just was reading actually something last night actually about like the people who are living life, are really the ones who really appreciate art of any form or do art, because they deal with creativity, because life itself is creative. It's always going farther and farther, So the people who enjoy it are really alive, like children. Children love that, when they see the thing, they are very excited, they do not think, they follow their intuition, so like I think it's like that, like a living art, because it is really an expression of life itself in us and in nature.
Mhm. I'm going to just offer one more question because it is getting late. There are wonderful comments, people thanking you, loving how color works in harmony, and enjoying the video and enjoying everybody's, enjoying this discussion. So one last question. What about rhythm and music would you consider as an important unifying, as important in unifying this group?
I'm going to try to just paraphrase the question. So it's asking about rhythm in music.
Rhythm and music. I think rhythm and music. I think Pat was talking about rhythm and color and rhythm in gesture. This is how I'm interpreting it. And so it's rhythm and music. Would you consider as I guess she's asking, would you consider this an important unifying part of this group?
I would say yes, my opinion, because I see the same things in many of them. Of course, you cannot say like it's everybody or nobody. There are like in betweens, so there are like many of the artists showing there actually at the museum. They do have like the same element, unified them, like with the composition, with the colors, with the so they do have that unified thing, with them. And because they are too, like they're inspired by each other, they are a group like Group 55. They sometimes met with each other, they know each other, they visited each other's studio, they saw like what's going on with so and so is doing that, she's doing that, so there was inspiration, in all of them, so this why like you will see some similarities of the things, whether it's approaching color or the line has its own voice, like independent of color or like whatever it is, you will see some unification really with that work, but yeah, each one is different really and unique.
I think that the musicians were very important, the composers really, a very important part of the panels. And I think Sam actually had met several of them while he was teaching at Springside Chestnut Hill. And I have evidence that he was a very good friend of Joseph Castaldo, who ultimately became head of a music academy, and then that became a performing academy, and then that eventually joined in with University of the Arts. But Joseph Castaldo was a good friend of Sam and Barbara Crawford's in the early 1950s. And George Rockberg also was in communication. I have letters from him before Group 55 started. And Sam's friendship with Ann Ting and Louis Kahn, I think, may have begun in the late 40s when Sam was teaching, was head of classes at Philadelphia Museum of Art, and Ann Ting was one of his teachers working with him. And so the fact that he had those connections and connections to other artists through his writing of for Art Digest, for instance, and his travels to Provincetown in New York, he, I think, had that idea of bringing it together, and he always knew that music was a way for help people to access different qualities of abstract art, different characteristics, because there's so many different kinds of music, and people are not looking for a subject matter, you know, when they're listening to music. Whereas, and there's much discussion, I think we have those from 1958, we have some transcripts of Joseph Castaldo and Sam Feinstein. And at that same time, we have Vincent Persichetti, as well as George Rockberg, participating in more than one forum. So I think they were very important. The musicians and the concept of music was very important as a way of accessing and helping to connect people and validating, in a sense. I think the whole Group 55 was a way of helping to validate abstract painting at a time when it was being either slightly ignored or sometimes seriously dismissed. And so this organization was an attempt to lift that and help people understand, and music was a great part of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, a comment just came in. I just want to share it with you from Diane Lockman to all the panelists. Thank you for an illuminating program. We are so pleased that our family is represented in this wonderful show by Fran Lockman's painting. So just to hear that.
And actually, Fran was one of the artists that exhibited more times in all of the shows than any of the other artists. She was really an important part of it. So
wow. And the painting September really is knockout, gorgeous painting that, you know, is one of the stars of the show.
Yeah.
So,
and she got her exhibitions I went through all the reviews of the time. She got a lot of notice as for her paintings all the way through her career. So, yeah.
Interestingly enough, she was exhibiting, I think, before she came to work with Sam in his workshops. He really had workshops, gymnasiums in a way, for painting. So there were many artists who studied with him or painted with him for years at the same time they were exhibiting, and Fran was one of those. Mm-hmm. And she continued to work with him and exhibit well into the 60s, I think even in the 70s. I met her at one point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I think with that, I'm sure everybody has noticed that I started fading into the dark, and I'm using my iPad to create some light. It didn't occur to me I'd have to relight myself on this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, Pat, Barbara, and Kassem. Thank you, Hildy, and thank you, Amanda, for managing the technology for us. It was also very perfect. And thank you to everyone who was a participant tonight, who joined us on this Zoom. And I hope that we've inspired you to come and see the show one more time if you're possibly able to. It's a beautiful show, and something that Woodmere as an institution is very proud of as an important accomplishment in our mission to tell the stories of Philadelphia's art and artists. So with that, again, I just want to say thank you to everyone. It's been wonderful tonight, and it's been a wonderful journey to have the exhibition on view at Woodmere. So thank you, and good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.